Emily and I first met about 7 years ago, and we clicked right away, quickly becoming close friends. We both grew up in the Midwest, where our strict Christian backgrounds taught us to put God above everything, even family. Sundays were all about church, followed by long talks about what we wanted out of life. I ended up going into engineering, and my career really took off while Emily excelled in her sales job, working with accounting software for a big tech firm in Atlanta. When I graduated from college, my parents gifted me a 3-bedroom house, a generous gesture they wanted to make while they were still here to see us enjoy it. Mom and Dad always found joy in sharing what they had. Emily and I got married a little over 5 years ago, and honestly, it felt like a non-stop honeymoon. Our connection was strong, and we were close in every way, even in the bedroom, sharing our intimacy often. Our friends couldn't help but joke about how close we were, and many of them called us soulmates. Then, our happiness doubled when we welcomed our twin girls, 2 beautiful, blonde little ones. After they arrived, our focus completely shifted toward raising them in a loving, caring home. Some might find our lifestyle a bit plain. Most weeknights we stayed in, saving Friday and Saturday for outings, and Sundays were still reserved for church. We didn't care much about social scenes or keeping up with the latest trends. Emily preferred simple, modest clothes for work and home, and we kept our intimate life private. Our marriage was solid, built on a foundation of trust and honesty. Emily was naturally affectionate, always showing love through little kisses, hugs, and thoughtful gestures. We shared our feelings openly and leaned on each other. Raising twins came with its own set of challenges, but I cherished every bit of it. Though the girls sometimes wore Emily out, I made sure to be there for her and help with whatever she needed. We made it a point to communicate well, tackling any issues as they came up. Life with Emily and the twins felt steady and fulfilling. But then, about a week before an annual work event, Emily found out she'd have to attend because several of her coworkers were sick. She tried to get out of it, even reaching out to her boss, but there wasn't much she could do. She looked at me, clearly disappointed, saying how much she hated leaving us and had done her best to stay home. I reassured her, telling her we'd manage for a few days, though we'd miss her. I helped her pack up and rode with her to the limo that her company had arranged for her airport ride. Our marriage was always built on trust, and we were both committed to making it work. In all the years we'd been together, Emily had never given me a reason to doubt her love or faithfulness. Our relationship was built on openness. We shared everything and truly operated as a team, especially when it came to our kids. But on the second night of her work exhibition, things took a strange turn. I got a message from Brian, a friend and colleague who was in Atlanta for a cybersecurity conference. He mentioned he'd seen Emily at the trade show and asked if I was in town, too, for the event. It sounded like a simple question, but something about his message made me uneasy. Brian's message included 2 photos and a video. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I opened them. The first picture caught me off guard. It was Emily, but dressed in a way I'd never seen before. She was in a short dress that hugged her body, showing off a plunging neckline that highlighted her chest, paired with high heels I didn't recognize. Her hair and makeup were done to perfection, making her look incredibly alluring, almost like a different person. I blinked, convinced it was a mistake. This can't be Emily, I thought, half chuckling to myself. But my amusement quickly faded as I looked closer. The next photo was worse, a close-up of Emily sitting beside Andrew, one of her supervisors. She was leaning in, smiling at him, and they looked unusually close. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I was seeing, but the more I tried, the more helpless I felt. Then came the video, and with it, my world came crashing down. In the clip, Emily was wrapped around Andrew, kissing him deeply, her arms around his neck while his hand rested on her. I felt my chest tighten, and before I knew it, hot tears streamed down my face. My heart pounded, and nausea washed over me. Right then, Brian messaged again. "Hey, are you okay? Want me to keep an eye out for her?" he asked. I replied, telling him I'd call her myself. I dialed her number, heart racing as it rang over and over, only to go straight to voicemail. Trying to sound normal, I left her a message, saying we missed her and hoped she was having a good night. Then, I sent Brian a quick update, letting him know I tried to reach her. Brian's response was immediate. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I just saw her check her phone, look at the caller ID, and put it back in her purse. I've never seen her like this." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Brian, thanks for telling me. I appreciate it more than you know. I'll take it from here, but please, let me know if you see anything else. And if possible, don't mention this to her. Don't waste your time trailing her. I'll handle it from here." I texted Brian back. He asked, "Are you going to be okay, buddy?" "No," I replied. "Far from it. But I know what I need to do. I'll get through this." My words felt hollow, though, and I was still numb from the shock. "Thanks again, Brian." "Anytime," he responded. "I'm here for you, man. Take care of yourself." With a final message of thanks, I poured myself a stronger drink and slumped down in the dim light of the living room, trying to process how my life had unraveled in less than 20 minutes. How had I missed all of this? I went over the past months, searching for signs. But no, Emily had never given me any reason to worry. In fact, if anything, the last 6 months had felt even better between us, like our connection had grown stronger. Nothing about this made any sense, and I was left feeling completely lost. An hour later, Brian sent more photos and videos, each one like a knife twisting deeper. The clips showed them dancing close, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting possessively on her back. One photo showed them kissing passionately on the dance floor, oblivious to everything around them. By the time I saw the last image of them, lost in a private, intimate kiss, I realized that whatever we'd had was over. I needed to face reality. In the following days, I poured every bit of focus I had into crafting a plan. My engineering mind breaking things down in the most methodical way I could manage, dissecting what needed to be done. Just as I was finalizing my approach late one night, Emily called. It was 10 p.m., and I had just received another damning photo from Brian. My hands shook as I picked up the phone, determined not to reveal that I knew anything. "Hey there," she said, her voice warm. "Sorry I missed your call earlier. I was tied up at a dinner meeting and couldn't get away." Her tone softened. "I miss you so much, baby. I wish I could be there with you, curled up under the covers, just showering you with kisses." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I miss you too, Emily. I love you so much." My voice sounded strangely calm. "The girls are doing great. I'll send you some pictures. They miss you a lot and can't wait for you to come home." "I tried to come back early, but my boss needs me here," she replied, sighing. "I hate being away from you all. But don't worry. We'll celebrate when I get back." "Are you finally done for the day?" I asked, holding my breath. "Yeah," she replied, sounding tired. "Just about to turn in. Love you, baby. I'll call you tomorrow." "Good night, Emily," I replied, barely keeping it together. "I love you more than words can express." I ended the call, staring at my phone as tears welled up. Despite everything, my love for her still felt painfully real, and I found myself wishing, against all logic, that this was just some nightmare I'd soon wake from. Lying in bed, sleep was impossible. My mind spiraled, haunted by images of where she really was and what she might be doing. My fears were confirmed when Brian messaged again, attaching one last photo. Emily and Andrew sitting on a hotel lobby sofa. They were locked in an embrace, her arms around his neck, his hands sliding beneath her short skirt. They looked, unmistakably, like a couple in love. "Hey buddy, I'm wrapping up for the night," Brian messaged. "But looks like she's still busy. Let me know if you need anything else." All I could reply was, "Thanks for everything, Brian." Then I sat there, alone in the darkness, preparing for the end of the life I thought I knew. Brian texted again, asking, "Want me to stop? I can put an end to this if it's too much for you." "It's rough to face," I replied, taking a shaky breath. "But no, don't stop. Let her do what she's doing. It's on her, not you." Thanking him once more, I eventually set the phone down. That night, I cried myself to sleep, the pain of Emily's betrayal tearing through me. Only the thought of my daughters kept me grounded, their presence providing just enough comfort to ease my heartache until sleep finally took over. The next morning, I woke up to several messages from Emily, all filled with hearts, kisses, and affectionate emojis. She told me how much she missed me and the girls, even hinting at how she couldn't wait for a passionate reunion once she was back. I read each word with a mixture of disbelief and anger, wondering how she could be so sweet and loving in her messages after everything I'd seen. When she eventually returned, she acted as if nothing had happened, pouring on the affection and behaving like the devoted wife. I started to wonder if there was something wrong. Maybe she was dealing with some mental disorder or on some kind of medication that caused her to split into these two versions of herself. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, the brutal truth was unavoidable. She had betrayed me, and there was no excusing that. When we talked, her voice sounded like nothing had changed. She went on about how much she'd missed us, but all I could think of was whether her infidelity or her endless lies hurt more. I decided I had to take action, do something concrete to understand what was really going on. Using my tech skills, I discreetly installed tracking software on her phone, designed primarily for locating lost devices. But this particular app had other capabilities. It could record calls, capture texts, and even save emails to a cloud account. I walked Emily through the setup, acting like it was just a new security feature I wanted on all our devices. I never imagined I'd be one to spy on my own spouse, but I couldn't ignore what I'd learned. My trust was shattered, and I needed to protect my daughters, and maybe, if possible, try to salvage our marriage. The twins kept me busy enough to keep my mind from spiraling all day long. Feeding them breakfast, tidying up the endless mess, and playing with their dolls gave me small pockets of peace in the middle of my chaos. Let me tell you, keeping up with 2 3-year-olds is no small feat, but it gave me the break I desperately needed from the relentless thoughts of Emily's betrayal. By 2 p.m., I finally got the girls down for a nap. After picking up their toys, cleaning up the kitchen, and grabbing a quick shower, I sat down at the dining table, catching my breath. Checking my phone, I saw that Emily had sent 6 more messages. Each one was affectionate, reminding me how much she missed us, and letting me know she'd call around 5 p.m. I took a deep breath, knowing that whatever came next, I had to be prepared. When her day ended, I sat down and logged into her cloud account, steeling myself as I accessed the files that had been recorded since I installed the tracking software. My heart pounded as I read through her text exchanges with Andrew. Each line was like a new cut, deeper and more painful than the last. Here are just a few excerpts. "You were incredible last night, baby. Can't wait for tonight. Thanks, kitten. I enjoyed it too. Can we meet in my room after work before dinner?" "Of course," she replied. "But I need to call my husband first. I should be ready by 5:15. Does your husband suspect anything?" "Of course not," she assured him. "He thinks I love him, and I'll keep it that way. We've been doing this for over 6 months, and he's clueless. Don't worry." I felt my chest tighten, barely able to breathe. Kitten? That was the pet name I had always called her. The one word that had always felt special, like it belonged just to us. Had she given him that too? How could I have been so blind? A fool this whole time, thinking I was married to someone who loved me. I couldn't contain it anymore. I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse pounding with pure rage. Without thinking, I grabbed a lamp and hurled it against the wall, watching as it shattered into countless pieces. The sound brought a strange, empty satisfaction, but my anger wasn't close to spent. I reached for something else to throw, when I suddenly heard the girls start to cry. Their small voices cut through my fury like a sharp wind, snapping me back to reality. I took a deep breath, letting go of the anger, and went into their room, scooping them up and holding them close until they settled. After calming them down, I cleaned up the mess I'd made, placing the girls in the living room to play while I sat with another strong drink. The reality was undeniable now. My marriage was done, completely beyond repair. I didn't have the stomach to go through the rest of her messages or recordings just yet, so I decided to let everything pile up in the cloud. I needed to be strategic to handle this the right way, for my daughter's sake. My priority now was to protect them and secure custody, whatever it took. For now, I knew I'd have to put on an act, playing the loving husband while I put together a plan. First, I'd consult a divorce lawyer and then look into hiring a private investigator if needed. My daughter's well-being was all that mattered now. Later, Emily called, her voice bright and affectionate as if nothing had changed. "Hey, sweetheart, how are the girls holding up?" she asked, her tone dripping with warmth. "They're missing their mommy," I replied, gritting my teeth and trying to sound loving. "Oh my goodness. I think about them all day long," she cooed. "And of course I miss you too. Can't wait to wrap my arms around you when I get back." I forced myself to stay calm, replying, "I'm counting the days until I can hold my beautiful, loving wife again." Her laughter was as carefree as if this were a real, loving conversation. "Soon, my love. I'll be home before you know it." Somehow, I managed to keep up the pretense through the entire 15-minute call. When it was finally time for her to hang up, she ended with, "I love you, Michael. I have to catch the bus back to the hotel, but I'll message you later." She was flawless with her lies, not a flicker of guilt in her voice. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you can imagine," I said, my voice steady even as the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me. The pain was almost unbearable, but I kept it hidden. As the weeks passed, my emotions morphed into a storm of contempt, anger, and an undeniable urge for revenge. I was determined to expose her lies and make her face the consequences. My love for Emily had once been everything, which made her betrayal all the harder to bear. When I picked her up at the airport, she greeted me with an embrace and a kiss, just as she'd promised. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she genuinely had some affection left for me. I wondered if her relationship with Andrew was just physical or if there was something deeper. Her behavior that evening confused me even more. She spent quality time with the girls, looking like a loving mother, and later, she was incredibly affectionate in bed, telling me over and over how much she'd missed us all. I found myself caught in a twisted hope, reciprocating her affection, desperately wishing this was real, that the woman I loved was still here with me. Yet, deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would emerge. I kept my knowledge hidden, continuing to act like a devoted husband, and to anyone looking in from the outside, our marriage appeared perfect. So much so that many of our friends openly envied it. This charade stretched on for 3 months, and during that time, I found no concrete signs of further infidelity. She was home every evening at her usual time, her phone behavior seemed normal, and there were no suspicious messages or sudden absences. A flicker of hope started to grow. Maybe it had been a temporary lapse, and perhaps we could get past it. But just as I dared to believe things might return to normal, I received a call from Mr. Collins, a private investigator I had quietly hired. He asked me to meet him the next day at his office to go over his findings. The following day, I drove downtown, feeling a mixture of dread and resignation as I entered Mr. Collins's conference room. "Good afternoon, Michael," Mr. Collins greeted me, his tone solemn. "Good to see you, Mr. Collins," I replied, settling into a chair across from him. Mr. Collins leaned forward, hands clasped. "Michael, I wish I had better news, but unfortunately, the findings aren't what we'd hoped for. Are you ready to review everything?" I nodded, though I could feel the weight settling in my chest. He placed a thick binder in front of me, divided into sections labeled text messages, voice transcripts, video calls, phone call transcripts, and photos. "Mr. Collins, I don't understand," I murmured, flipping through the binder with trembling fingers. "For the past 3 months, I've been monitoring her schedule and behavior. She's been the perfect wife and mother. None of this makes any sense." Mr. Collins gave me a sympathetic nod. "I understand, Michael. Let me walk you through the evidence. It might help to clarify things." I had purposely avoided accessing the cloud files, holding on to a fragile hope that everything would somehow work out. But my optimism was shattered as Mr. Collins laid it all bare. There were over 75 pages of text messages, each one filled with intimate exchanges between Emily and Andrew, leaving no room for doubt. 25 pages of emails showed them planning meetups, and 75 pages of photos documented their rendezvous, each time-stamped, capturing them entering and leaving hotel rooms together. Mr. Collins flipped to a section of video calls, over 82 in total, along with transcripts of phone conversations spanning 50 pages. Emily and Andrew have been meeting at a motel at least 4 times a week, Mr. Collins explained gently. They've maintained this for the past 3 months. I sat back, staring at the stack of evidence in front of me. It was undeniable, impossible to ignore. My marriage had become a lie, an elaborate facade Emily had maintained, fooling not only me but herself, perhaps in the process. As Mr. Collins continued, he revealed that Emily had been spending an average of 2 hours with these men each time they met. And for the past month, he added, there's been another man. They've been meeting your wife 4 times a week. He slid a photo across the table. Do you recognize this man? My heart sank. Oh my God. Is that Mark Spencer, her company's CEO? I stammered. Are you telling me she's involved with 2 men, one of whom is her CEO? Mr. Collins nodded, his expression grave. Based on the evidence, texts, phone calls, and videos, it's clear she's in a sexual relationship with both men. One video, labeled Balcony, captures her with Mark during a personal moment. They're completely unaware of the recording. We have both high-definition video and audio. He started the video on a large screen, and there was Emily, leaning over a balcony railing with Mark behind her. The image hit me like a punch to the gut, and a wave of nausea overtook me. I stumbled out of the room, took several deep breaths, and forced myself to regain composure before returning. I'm ready. Show me everything, I managed to say, my voice steady but hollow. Mr. Collins hesitated but continued, moving to another video. This one, labeled Balcony 2, involves both Mark and Andrew. I apologize for the graphic nature, but these videos can serve as substantial evidence in the event of a divorce or custody proceedings. I sat in stunned silence, unable to comprehend that this was my wife. Could this really be Emily? I whispered, my mind desperately clinging to denial. But the proof was there, cold and undeniable. Mr. Collins went on. We've looked into Andrew Scott and Mark Spencer. Andrew has been married for 10 years, with 4 young children. Mr. Spencer has been married for 25 years and has 3 grown children. Their texts suggest Andrew introduced Mark into the relationship after your wife expressed interest in a threesome. I know it's difficult, so we'll give you time to process. Here's everything on a USB drive for your lawyer. I left the office with the USB in hand, barely aware of my surroundings as I walked through the city. When I met with my lawyer, she was just as shocked. The evidence was overwhelming, yet she could hardly believe that Emily showed no signs of infidelity at home. Emily kept up her role as the loving wife and mother flawlessly, acting as if everything were completely normal. The lawyer outlined possible legal steps and scheduled another meeting to discuss further, assuring me that we could proceed with the divorce as soon as I was ready. Without hesitation, I instructed her to begin the paperwork. Leaving her office, I felt the weight of finality settle over me. Though I'd known it was over before these meetings, the videos crushed any faint hope I might have had of reconciliation. I could hardly recognize the woman Emily had become. That evening, after tucking the girls into bed, I sat down next to Emily in the living room, pretending everything was as it had always been. I heard Unfaithful is a good movie, I suggested, feigning casual interest. Let's give it a try. Sure, she replied, smiling as she hit play, completely unaware of what was coming. I had rehearsed this approach, knowing full well the theme of infidelity in the film, and hoping to gauge her reaction. I leaned back, trying to keep my tone casual. Funny thing, I said, as if the idea had just crossed my mind. There's this new intern at my office who's been giving me all kinds of attention for months. Can you picture me with another woman? I chuckled, playing it off like a joke. Emily's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. Really? Who is she? She demanded, her voice tinged with jealousy. If I even suspect you're thinking about her, I'm gone. Got it? You're mine and no one else's. Her possessiveness almost made me laugh. Here she was, getting worked up over a harmless mention of an intern, while she was entangled in an affair, or 2 actually. Michael, she pressed on, why didn't you tell me about her sooner? What's her name? Emily. Calm down, I replied, trying to deflect. She's just an intern. A young girl who's been flirting a bit. I've ignored it, totally harmless. Then, steering the conversation, I asked, "What about you, Emily? You're the most attractive woman in your office. Are you telling me no one's ever flirted with you?" "Of course not," she said quickly, looking indignant. "They all know I'm married, and I'd never cheat on you. So, in all these years, you've never thought about being with another man? Not even a harmless kiss?" I looked directly into her eyes. "Emily, have you ever cheated on me?" Her face flushed, anger flashing in her eyes. "Are you serious? How could you even ask me that? I show you all the time how much I love you. I've always been faithful. I can't believe you'd even think otherwise," she snapped. I nodded and muttered an apology, pretending to agree just to keep the peace. But inside, I was stunned by how smoothly she lied. She could have been an actress with how convincingly she delivered her lines, seeming almost offended by the accusation. Once she settled back into watching the movie, I decided it was time. I pulled up my phone, finding the photo I'd saved. A shot of Emily and Andrew on the dance floor, locked in a passionate kiss, his hand resting firmly on her lower back. I took a deep breath, waiting for just the right moment. Emily glanced over at me. "What are you doing, Michael? Why aren't you watching the movie?" "Because what I'm looking at," I replied, staring at the photo, "is far more real than anything on that screen." She froze, her eyes narrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" I muted the movie and held up my phone so she could see the picture. Her face went pale, and she didn't say a word, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find something to say. "Quite the passionate kiss you're sharing there with Andrew," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Care to explain? Where did you get this?" she stammered, finally finding her voice. I raised an eyebrow. "You were having dinner with Brian Stanton, who saw you with this man. He sent me this picture to ask if it was you." "And it is you, isn't it?" I said, my tone mocking. "I've never seen you wear something so revealing. Were you trying to impress your boyfriend?" "Go on, I'm listening." She took a shaky breath, her voice trembling as she started her story. "Michael, it was just one dance. He was drunk. After the song, he grabbed me and kissed me. You don't see what happened after. I slapped him and caused a scene. I would never allow that. I bought the dress for a business dinner, not realizing it was too revealing. I'm so sorry." I looked at her, barely containing my disbelief. It was astounding how quickly she spun a story, shifting blame and casting herself as the unwilling participant. Her words rang hollow, her explanation flimsy. And as I stared at her, I realized this was only the beginning of what she'd have to answer for. She stammered, looking increasingly desperate. "All right, I understand. These things happen. And that was the only incident." "Yes," she said quickly, nodding. "And he won't try it again." We resumed watching the movie, but I could sense her unease, her shoulders tense beside me. After a few more minutes, I took out my phone again. This time, I pulled up a video of her and Andrew on a couch, his hand wandering up her skirt. I felt her stiffen beside me as she noticed what I was watching, her face going ghostly pale. "What are you watching now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Remember that night you called, saying you were turning in after a long day?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "Yes," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Interesting, because a couple of hours after that call, I received another message from Brian. This time, a video. I pressed play, showing her and Andrew kissing, his hands everywhere. "I'd love to hear your explanation for this," I said, my anger turning into a cold amusement. Her face crumpled as she tried to explain. "Michael, I'm so sorry. After we spoke that night, Andrew called and said we needed to discuss a client issue. He asked to meet me in the lobby. I'd had a few drinks, and you know how I get tipsy. Nothing happened beyond what you saw. I told him to stop and reminded him I'm married. Please, believe me." "Kitten," I said, emphasizing the pet name. "The problem is, I've always believed you. But in the last 20 minutes, you've lied to me twice." I looked at her, letting my words sink in. "Can you see my perspective here? I'm at home, alone, looking at pictures and videos of my wife kissing her boss, dressed more provocatively than I've ever seen. How do you think that feels?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she choked out, "Michael, I love you. This all happened months ago. Why didn't you confront me sooner? Honestly, I wanted to see if you'd come clean on your own. I wanted to believe that my wife was honest and transparent. But now I see exactly where we stand." I paused, studying her discomfort, almost relishing her squirming. "Are there other lies? Are you in love with him?" Her face crumpled as she began to sob. "I only love you, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you." "Please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "stop saying you love me. I need answers, not empty words. Are there other lies? Or was this the whole story?" She took a shaky breath, still sobbing. "Nothing beyond a kiss happened, I swear. I told him to stop every time. You have to believe me." "Fine," I replied, feigning calm. "I trust you, but I'm confused. You've never dressed like that for me. Never gone out of your way with your hair and makeup like that. Was it for him? Do you have feelings for him? Or are you thinking of leaving me?" More tears streamed down her face. "No, Michael. I love only you. I don't want to lose you. I don't know why I dressed like that. Maybe because the other women were and I felt insecure. But I swear, nothing more happened." I exhaled, nodding slowly. "I get that. But if it was all innocent, why didn't you tell me about your interactions with Andrew? If nothing happened, then why keep it a secret?" She sat there, silent, her explanations running dry. In that silence, I finally saw her for who she truly was. Emily looked at me, her voice shaking as she pleaded, "I didn't want to upset you. He's my superior and I couldn't risk losing my job. If anything serious had happened, I would have told you right away. You understand, don't you?" I comforted her, giving her a gentle kiss and holding her as she cried, my mind already focused on the month-long plan I had set in motion. That night we made love, and I detached completely, imagining I was one of her many lovers. I wasn't going to deny myself the pleasure or warn her about what was coming. Her passion that night was intense, as if she was trying to prove my place in her heart. But I was indifferent, simply watching her performance and appreciating the irony. The following morning, I checked the cloud for any new messages, and sure enough, Emily didn't disappoint. "Oh my God," she had texted Andrew. "Someone took photos of us at the fair and sent them to Michael. His friends saw me at the restaurant without Michael. I'm unsure if he's aware, but the video showed us kissing. Damn, now that you mention it, I do remember a man with a phone watching us, but I didn't think much of it." Andrew responded, "How did Michael react?" "Nothing," she replied. "I convinced him nothing happened. Told him I was drunk, and he believed me. A few kisses and good lovemaking always work. Be cautious, baby," he replied. "So, tomorrow at 1 p.m. as usual? Can't wait. Love you, baby." "Love you too, kitten." I sat back, staring at the screen. Any lingering doubts were gone. I'd been nothing but a fool, but I found a twisted satisfaction in playing my part, waiting to see how far she'd go. The first step was securing my financial affairs. I transferred funds out of shared accounts, closed a few I no longer needed, and lowered the credit limit on our primary Visa to $2,500 to minimize any potential damage. Emily didn't notice any of the changes, blissfully unaware of my growing fury. I confirmed with my lawyer that since the house had been mine before the marriage, I'd have no obligation to leave when I filed for divorce. And with everything nearly in place, I drafted an email. I attached every piece of damning evidence. The videos, photos, texts, each one revealing Emily's betrayals. I prepared it to be sent to all of her contacts, including her friends, family, and colleagues. And I didn't stop there. I made duplicate binders with the evidence, addressed to Mrs. Spencer and Mrs. Scott, ensuring they would be fully informed of their husbands' indiscretions. These binders would be delivered simultaneously with the legal filing, making sure everyone involved felt the full impact of what they tried to keep hidden. As I reviewed the final details, I took a grim satisfaction in knowing that Emily, so oblivious to the changes and lies piling up around her, had no idea what was coming. As everything fell into place, I instructed my lawyer to initiate civil lawsuits against both Andrew, Emily's manager, and Mark, the company's CEO. With the company being a major player on the East Coast, my lawyer was thrilled at the prospect of implicating high-profile figures in a public scandal. Our plan was to propose a settlement, but only after making it clear we were prepared to reveal the CEO and manager's misconduct if it went to trial. Alongside the legal team, I worked closely with child services attorneys to ensure I'd have a strong case for full custody of our daughters. We compiled every document, conversation, and video into a rock-solid case. In the weeks that followed, life carried on as if nothing was amiss. Emily and I tended to the children, spent evenings together, and kept up the appearance of a happy couple. Yet, I could tell my silence was driving her mad. She was in knots, clearly tormented by the uncertainty of what I was thinking and whether I truly suspected anything. To add to her anxiety, I occasionally dropped subtle, probing questions. "So, Emily," I asked one night over dinner, "has your boss done anything strange since that fair? Is there something you'd like to tell me?" The look of panic she concealed was a marvel. With her usual grace, she replied, "No, nothing out of the ordinary. Things actually feel, well, they're a little odd between us since we're both pretending nothing's happened." She claimed that Andrew was behaving professionally and that they barely spoke due to their busy schedules. I smirked, watching her skillfully dodge the truth, impressed by how easily she could lie to the man she'd promised to love. That night, I made one final decision. I would let go of the simmering anger, making sure our last night together would be unforgettable. I took full advantage of her vulnerability and desire to reconnect. The next afternoon, the plan was set in motion. Sheriff Clark entered the offices of Tri International and asked to speak with Mr. Spencer. In his spacious office, Mark Spencer took the envelope, dread tightening in his chest as he read the lawsuit details. He called his secretary to summon Andrew while frantically dialing him. Within minutes, Andrew stormed into the office, his face pale. Sheriff Clark had just served him as well. "What the hell?" Mark demanded, slamming the papers onto his desk. "If my wife finds out about this, I'm finished. This is on you. You said she'd never turn on us. Fix it." Michael entered, his expression unreadable but his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Emily, didn't expect you here tonight. Figured you'd be with Andrew. Oh wait, he's got a family too. Might be a little awkward for him." "Huh. Michael, please," Emily whispered, desperation in her voice. She reached for his hand, leading him over to the sofa. She tried to keep her composure, though her face was pale and her hands trembled. "Michael, I was wrong. I know I hurt you terribly, but please, can we talk?" He crossed his arms, looking at her coolly. "Talk? Sure. Let's hear what you have to say, Emily. Go ahead and explain how you love me while sneaking around with Andrew and your CEO. I'm all ears." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. "Michael, I know I made mistakes, but they were mistakes. I swear they didn't mean anything. It was a terrible lapse in judgment. I couldn't resist the excitement, but it didn't change how I feel about you. I love you, Michael. You and the girls mean everything to me." Michael scoffed, shaking his head. "Is that so? Mean everything to you? Then why did you lie, Emily? Why did you keep lying, even when I gave you a chance to come clean?" He leaned in, his voice low and harsh. "You lied to my face. You betrayed our family. And now you want to tell me it was meaningless." Her hands shook as she reached out to touch his arm. "Please, Michael. I don't want to lose you. I've already lost everything else. Please don't take my family away from me." Michael watched her, the resentment in his eyes hardening. "Your family, huh? And what about Andrew's family? Or Mark's family? Do they mean nothing? You helped destroy their families, too." Emily's face crumpled, and she broke down, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know I was wrong. I can't excuse what I did, but I'll do anything to fix this. I don't want a divorce, Michael. I'll go to therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't leave me." He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see his jaw clench. "Emily, the time for apologies is over. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. And now you'll have to live with the consequences of those choices." Emily stared back, her mind racing. She could feel her world closing in, knowing there was no way to turn back. The silence between them was broken only by her quiet sobs, as she realized just how far she'd fallen, and how little of Michael's forgiveness remained. "Emily, if you think I'll just forgive you and forget, you're in for a shock," Michael replied, his tone cutting. "I've given you countless chances to come clean, to stop lying, but you kept digging yourself deeper. And now you ask me why I'm going after Spencer and Andrew." He let out a bitter laugh. "Because they're a part of this disaster. They're executives of a billion-dollar company, and after what they've done to me and our family, I'll make sure they feel it too. They didn't care about the damage they were causing, so why should I?" Emily's face turned ashen as she realized the gravity of what was unfolding. She had lost all control, not only over Michael but over everything. For the first time, she could see the intensity and resolve in his eyes, a side of him she'd never known. Overcome with despair, she sank to her knees, clutching his legs, begging for forgiveness. Michael felt a momentary pang of sympathy, but he forced himself to remain firm. He gently lifted her onto the sofa, speaking to her as if she were a child. "Listen, Emily, pack a bag and stay at your mom's for a few days. Get a lawyer. Then we can arrange to meet and go over everything. But until then, stay away from Mark and Andrew. Things are going to get messy." Later that evening, at her mother's house, Emily tried to compose herself. She explained to her mom that she and Michael had a disagreement and that she needed a place to stay for a while, trying to hide the true extent of her devastation. But by 11 p.m., desperation overtook her, and she called Andrew, her hands shaking as she dialed his number. Andrew answered immediately, his voice tense. "Emily?" "Yes, it's me," she said, her voice breaking. Andrew quickly looped in Mark for a three-way call. "Mark, are you on?" "I'm here," came Mark's cold reply. "Emily, did you manage to persuade him to drop the lawsuits and the divorce?" Emily hesitated, her voice filled with fear. "No. In fact, he kicked me out and warned me that this was only the beginning." She choked back a sob. "He's planning to go after both of you, Mark. He wants to destroy everything." A silence followed, the weight of Michael's retribution settling heavily on them. Michael approached the group slowly, noting their discomfort. He greeted Emily with a cold, distant nod and turned his attention to the two men at her side. Well, he began, his voice steady. "Looks like the gang's all here. Didn't expect you'd be so eager for a face-to-face." Mark Spencer cleared his throat, his usual authoritative demeanor slightly rattled. "Michael, I'm Mark Spencer. I requested this meeting," he said, attempting to sound composed. Michael's eyes narrowed, and he let out a dark chuckle. "Spencer, you look different in person. The videos don't do you justice," he said, savoring the discomfort that spread across Mark's face. Then he turned to Andrew, who was visibly nervous, shifting uncomfortably beside his boss. "And Andrew Scott, the man who thought it'd be fine to sleep with my wife and destroy my family," Michael said icily. "Can't say it's a pleasure to meet either of you." Spencer cleared his throat again, trying to regain his composure. "Listen, Michael, I understand you're furious, and you have every right to be. If I were in your shoes, I can't say I'd react any differently. But we need to talk. Walk with us." Michael didn't budge, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Say what you came to say." "I'm not going anywhere." Spencer glanced at Andrew, who nodded nervously, before speaking again. "Michael, we're offering you a settlement. Something substantial. Drop the lawsuit, keep this private, and we'll compensate you well. Your family doesn't need to go through this. Think of your daughters, your reputation." "Think of my reputation?" Michael interrupted, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You think I care about reputation now? You two used my wife like a pawn. And now that it's coming back to bite you, you want to make me an offer." Andrew stepped in, his voice shaky. "Michael, we're just trying to make this right. There's no need for anyone else to get hurt over this." "Oh, you're worried about people getting hurt now?" Michael's voice turned low and menacing. "Spencer, didn't you mention you had people who could handle situations like this? Were you planning to have them handle me?" Spencer's face paled, his calm slipping. Michael, don't misunderstand. We only want this to go away quietly. Michael crossed his arms, unimpressed. Here's the thing. I have no interest in settling or forgetting. I have every piece of evidence, and I intend to use it. You two don't get to control this anymore. He let his words sink in, savoring the panic flickering across their faces. You might want to brace yourselves, Michael continued, because once this is over, your families, your reputations, and your precious company, they're finished. Enjoy the show. With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving them stunned and speechless. Spencer took a deep, steadying breath and spoke with forced calm. We want you to drop the lawsuits against me, Andrew, and the company. Michael let out a dark chuckle. Is that all? Sorry, but someone has to pay for taking away the most important thing in my life, he said, his gaze shifting to Emily, who was now silently crying. The only woman I ever loved and the mother of my children. He added, his tone bitter. Spencer's expression hardened. What will it take for you to drop this, and maybe take Emily back? Name your price. Michael shook his head slowly, a look of finality in his eyes. No amount of money would make me take her back. She threw away my love, my trust, and our children's stability for a fling with you two. He paused, then added, I'll consider dropping the lawsuits, but only under two conditions. First, I want $5 million. Second, I want to meet with both your wives, and Emily has to confess everything to them. If you agree to those terms, I'll end the legal proceedings. Spencer's face twisted with anger. Go to hell, Michael. I'll offer you $100,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. You keep this quiet forever, and we all walk away. Michael smiled, amused by the insultingly low offer. Tell you what, I'll lower it to $4 million. But your families must know what you've done. At that, Spencer lost his temper, his voice turning icy. Michael, you're sealing your fate. Think it over. Drop the charges and take Emily back. It was just a fling. We can resolve this without destroying everyone's lives. Without another word, Michael pulled out his phone, typed out a few prearranged text messages, then opened his email. In a matter of moments, he dispatched a file packed with incriminating evidence. Photos, videos, texts, to all of Emily's family, friends, and colleagues. He'd also arranged for couriers to deliver packages of the evidence to Mark and Andrew's homes, ensuring their families would be in no doubt of the truth. Spencer's face went pale as he watched, his fury barely contained. Michael, are you even listening? What's your answer? Are you dropping the charges? Michael's cold gaze held him steady. My answer to you, Mark, Andrew, and my wife is simple. Go to hell. Just then, both Mark and Andrew's phones began to ring. They glanced down at their screens, dread washing over them. It was their wives. Spencer's face twisted in rage, and he shot Michael a murderous glare. Andrew, visibly shaking, looked like he might collapse. Emily, confused and frantic, turned to Michael. What's happening? She whispered, fear in her eyes. Michael's response was ice cold. Check your email in a few minutes, Emily. You'll understand. Spencer, having ended a frantic call with his wife, pointed a finger at Michael, his face contorted with rage. You're dead, Michael. I'll make sure you suffer for this. He spat before storming out of the bar. Andrew turned to Michael, his voice trembling. Why would you do this to me? Michael's face hardened with incredulity. Why, he repeated. You used my wife, the mother of my children, as part of your little escapades with Spencer, and now you're surprised that someone would hold you accountable? Michael met Andrew's desperate stare with a cold, unflinching gaze. Everything I sent to your wife was to expose exactly who you are and how you've destroyed lives. This is on you. Just then, Emily's phone started buzzing with calls from her family and friends. At first, she tried to deny everything, but when she finally opened her email and saw the evidence Michael had sent, the photos, the messages, the videos, her face went pale. She looked at Michael, her expression twisting from shock to fury. How could you do this to me? She demanded, her voice breaking with anger and despair. Michael's voice was like ice. "You made it easy," he replied. "I loved you, Emily, but it's over. Once I hand over the audio recording of this meeting to the authorities and social services, my lawyer's confident I'll get full custody of the girls. You'll be lucky to avoid prison." He paused, his gaze hard. "I'm sorry, but you have to face the consequences of what you've done." In the weeks that followed, the fallout was devastating. Tricom, the company where both Andrew and Mark worked, quickly moved to settle the lawsuit, compensating Michael with $2 million to keep things out of court. Mark Spencer, ousted from his CEO position, was terminated without severance due to a breach of the morals clause in his contract, forfeiting over $10 million in stock options and a $5 million severance package. He later received a 5-year prison sentence for conspiracy to commit homicide and other charges. His wife filed for divorce while he was incarcerated, and an investigation into his business dealings left him bankrupt, stripping him of everything he'd once held dear. Andrew fared no better. His wife divorced him and won a $1 million judgment in a civil trial for conspiracy, infidelity, and loss of affection. Unable to find work in his industry, Andrew ended up taking jobs as a day laborer. Michael found grim satisfaction in knowing that Andrew had fallen into poverty, far from the lavish life he once enjoyed. As for Emily, the consequences were swift and severe. Although initially facing a 5-year prison sentence for conspiracy, Michael's lawyer helped her negotiate a reduced penalty, 1 year of house arrest, followed by 4 years of probation. Nevertheless, she lost all custody rights over their daughters, and Michael was granted full custody. The evidence against her in court was overwhelming, and without rights to the house, she was homeless after her release, eventually moving into her mother's basement. Emily's family, having seen the extent of her betrayal, turned against her, resulting in the permanent loss of visitation rights with her children. The email Michael sent out revealed a darker side of Emily that no one had imagined, shattering her support network completely. She spiraled into a deep depression, and after multiple suicide attempts, she now relies on medication and has been in and out of mental health facilities, struggling to come to terms with the wreckage she left in her wake. For Michael, however, life slowly found a new balance. Free from work and the chaos of the divorce, he dedicated himself entirely to raising his daughters, focusing on rebuilding a stable and loving home. The road ahead was long, but he was finally able to smile again, knowing he'd done everything to protect his family and give his daughters a future unburdened by their mother's choices. Michael devoted himself entirely to raising his daughters, providing them with the stability they needed after the storm. Since Emily's suicide attempts, the girls hadn't seen their mother, but they received abundant support from Michael's sister and mother, whose love and guidance helped them heal. Though Michael's calculated revenge had brought him some satisfaction, he quickly realized that it couldn't mend his broken heart. The betrayal had left scars too deep to ignore, and while part of him still held on to love and even a trace of forgiveness for Emily, the memory of her deceit would always remain etched in his mind. Taking care of his daughters filled his days, keeping loneliness at bay and giving him purpose. But the lies, the betrayal, and the loss of trust weighed heavily on him. He knew it would take years before he could open his heart fully again. For now, he found peace in the steady rhythm of his life with his girls, vowing to give them a future filled with honesty, love, and stability. In time, he hoped they'd emerge from this ordeal stronger, unscarred, and ready for the brighter days ahead.